Good afternoon, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Caracas, Venezuela on July 29th, 2024. It is the day after the presidential election in Venezuela, which, according to official results, was won late last night by Nicolas Maduro, the incumbent from the United Socialist Party, by a margin of about 51% to 44%, the remaining 5% or so of the vote having been picked up by a bevy of alternate candidates. The opposition has vigorously contested the validity of the official results. It has called for a general strike. There have been reports of some protests. So I'm heading out into the streets. This is the first time that I have left my hotel during the day today. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to find, but I wanted to give my followers a sense of what is happening in Caracas after this hotly contested election. So stay with me and we'll see what we'll see. So there were some, looked like police officers, mostly female police officers on motorcycles that just went by. This is obviously a very busy thoroughfare cutting through central Caracas. And I believe that I am now approaching the botanical garden. So I'd like to tell you about a comment that I saw yesterday on X. The comment was made in response to a post of mine relating to my most recent published report from Caracas, where I talked about my visits to 2 polling stations in the Caracas area yesterday and what I had seen there. And in a nutshell, what I had seen was very efficient, orderly, and transparent, not sure what's going on here, but transparent voting process. And Anyways, the person who commented on my post about my visits to the polling stations was an individual who identifies as a retired so-called journalist from several major corporate media outlets in Canada. His Twitter handle is something like Visitors Digest. He's been following me for some time, and occasionally he'll pop up with some snide remark about my journalism. He disputes that I am in fact a journalist. He clearly is of a strongly right-wing persuasion, as are, frankly, the vast majority of so-called journalists in Canada's corporate media. And he commented on my tweet by saying something along the lines of, there are literally dozens of videos of police repression on voting day in Venezuela. And along with his comment, he posted or reposted a video that was posted yesterday on election day by someone who appears to be an oil trader or an oil analyst in the United Kingdom, in London. And I watched the video. I've watched it 2 or 3 times. I'm going to share it with you. And before I do that, I'm going to show it to you right now in full. And before I do that, I'm going to just summarize for you what, according to this oil trader, the video showed. according to the oil trader, the video showed a bunch of police officers being chased away from a polling station somewhere in Venezuela by irate supporters of the opposition. And this oil trader claims that the police officers had gone to the polling station to disrupt the vote. Those were the words he used, disrupt the vote. So have a look at this video, and then I'm going to comment upon it. Now, unlike this corporate media type, Visitor's Digest, who routinely offers snide commentary on my Twitter posts, I actually analyze these videos from the perspective of a lawyer, because that is my main gig. As I've mentioned on prior occasions, I've been practicing law for far too long, over 30 years. And so I assess the credibility, the completeness, the source, anything that I can in order to come to some kind of a reliable conclusion about what I'm looking at and what its significance is, it may be, for the issue at hand. The issue here being, of course, the legitimacy of President Maduro's official victory yesterday. So notice a few things about this video. First of all, we have no idea who actually shot the video. Secondly, there's no way to tell from that video when it was shot. Thirdly, I looked high and low for some kind of evidence in the video that it actually was taken in Venezuela, but unless I missed something, I didn't see anything in there that which clearly indicates that the video actually was shot in Venezuela. What it does look like is that a whole bunch of police officers, who do not look to me to be armed, certainly they're not carrying any automatic weapons, and maybe they're carrying some pistols, but they didn't seem to be armed, and they are running away. And some people are throwing projectiles at them, but how the hell do we know who's throwing the projectiles and why the projectiles are being thrown? And this oil trader, I may have omitted to mention this, it's not just that the claim is not just that the police went there to quote unquote disrupt the vote, and we don't even know what that means. But they were ordered to do so by Maduro. That's the claim of the oil trader. Of course, the video itself does not in any way, shape, or form constitute evidence that Maduro ordered these police officers to do anything. So at the end of the day, if you look at this from the perspective of a lawyer who's done litigation for a long time and who is, experienced in the assessment of purported evidence, it actually doesn't prove a damn thing. It proves nothing at all. I don't even know those cops were Venezuelan cops. I don't even know that they were in Venezuela at all. I don't know when it was taken. It might have been taken on some other time, at some other occasion. I don't even know if that was a polling station that those cops went to. And if they're so mean and nasty, the Venezuelan police acting at the behest of Maduro, why didn't they have any heavy weapons, and why were they running away from the projectiles? Why didn't they fight back? None of it really adds up. And so I offer this to you as an exercise in critical thinking about these so-called dozens of videos that this character on Twitter claims are circulating out there, which show irregularities in the voting process yesterday. Take a hard look at them and ask yourselves, what does this actually prove? Does it prove anything at all? Does it provide support for the claims that are attached to it? And I'll tell you, I saw another video, I haven't been able to find it, but somebody, obviously who's quite antagonistic to Maduro and Chavismo, posted a video which purported to show it was either agents of the Maduro government or supporters of his party stealing ballot boxes from some polling station. And what you see is a bunch of, it looks like young men, exiting a building, carrying these big white boxes. Now, I have no way of knowing, again, just looking at the video. If I can find it, I'm going to share it with you, but I assure you that it's impossible to tell from the video who these men are, because their faces are either covered with a scarf or they've bowed their heads and they're wearing a baseball cap. And it's not clear where this thing was taken, when it was taken, who took it. And I can assure you that what they're carrying bears absolutely no resemblance. They have these like white crates on their shoulders. It bears absolutely no resemblance to the ballot boxes that I saw when I visited the polling stations yesterday. And so, at the end of the day, the thing proves absolutely nothing. Nothing. You know, videos can be extremely effective propaganda tools. Typically, I see this so many times on social media, somebody will post a video accompanied by some quite inflammatory or dramatic commentary, and the video does appear to be consistent with aspects of the commentary, but when you actually look closely at the video, you realize with a critical eye that it doesn't answer or provide substantial support for many of the most inflammatory elements of the claim accompanying the video. And so, really important to think critically when you see video evidence that purports to show wrongdoing by people who are targets of the Western hegemonic project in particular. So it's now late afternoon on the day after the election. I'm continuing my walk through what appears to be a university facility, actually. Somewhere around here there are botanical gardens. It's quite beautiful here and peaceful, but there's almost nobody in the streets, which is interesting for a Monday afternoon. In any event, the last time I checked, there had been quite a mix of reactions at a governmental level to the proclamation of President Maduro's victory yesterday. In this particular region, the governments of Bolivia, Nicaragua, Cuba have warmly welcomed the result and congratulated President Maduro. Also, St. Kitts, the Caribbean island of St. Kitts. This is, by the way, not an exhaustive review. This is just based upon my quick review of the Western press reports. There have been African leaders who have congratulated President Maduro. The leader of the Russian Federation heartily congratulated President Maduro and talked about deepening Russia's relationship with Venezuela. And by the way, I'm sure that this is one of the reasons why the West nowadays, well, it's been this way ever since Hugo Chavez rose to power, is intensely hostile to the Bolivarian Revolution and to the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, because, amongst other things, it is developing closer ties with the Russian Federation and also China. China, too, has congratulated President Maduro. And let's not forget that China's population, its population is greater than the combined population of the United States, Canada, and Europe. And it also talked about deepening its ties and its economic relations with the Venezuelan people, something which obviously would be of great benefit to Venezuela, given that China's economy now is, by a significant margin, the largest in the world on a purchasing power parity basis, which many economists believe to be a more accurate measure of national wealth than nominal GDP. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. I took a quick look to see whether India's government had recognized the official result. I wasn't able to find any information about that. Interestingly, Colombia and Brazil are taking a quite cautious approach, and neither of them has rejected the result or embraced it. Rather, they've called for more information and repeated the mantra that the will of the Venezuelan people must be respected, which obviously no reasonable person would disagree with. And they seem to want some more information about the results on a poll-by-poll basis. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Surprisingly and disappointingly, the government of Gabriel Boric in Chile has been quite pointed in condemning the outcome and is all but accusing President Maduro of electoral fraud. Within this region, no one should be surprised that the right-wing kook, the outright fascist lunatic Javier Milei in Argentina, is leading a group of Latin American states in denouncing the result, the official result. And then, by the way, President Maduro, on the night of his victory, had very choice words for Javier Milei, called him, I tried to understand it as best I could because I was listening to him without a translator and I don't speak fluent Spanish, but I'm pretty sure he called him a fascist and a buffoon and stupid. I agree with all of the above. Nonetheless, other leaders from Latin America who've been joined in include the leaders of Paraguay and Costa Rica. I believe Panama also is taking a hard line on this, and there are a few others, smaller Latin American countries. So the reaction has been mixed, and for the most part, I think it's aligned with the ideologies or the ideological orientation of the particular governments. The more left-leaning they are, the more likely they are to condone the outcome, to embrace the outcome. The more right-wing they are, the more likely they are to reject it. And I think the one surprise in that regard is Chile, because I believe Gabriel Boric is supposed to have a somewhat progressive record. I don't think he's a left-wing radical by any means. Now, when it comes to the Western world, of course, the reactions have been negative, but they haven't been quite as pointed as I would have thought. The Canadian government put out a statement today, which was actually somewhat diplomatic in tone. It didn't accuse the Maduro government of electoral fraud, which is something. It didn't reject the results, called for the will of the Venezuelan people to be respected, and it issued a precise demand, and the price, not even demand, really, it was urging the Venezuelan government to publish the poll-by-poll results. So I did some quick research after I read this statement from Canada's Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, and Canada, in its elections, does make available, at some point following the completion of voting, poll-by-poll results. As I understand, I was looking at the website of Elections Canada, it does this after validation of the results, which, according to the website, generally occur within 7 days of the vote. So the publication of poll-by-poll results might take a number of days in Canada following Election Day, and in fact could take in excess of a week, as I read the statement on the Elections Canada website. And furthermore, it appears, again, I'm interpreting the statement, that they are provided to the candidates upon their request. So it's not something which will be put out on some website somewhere promptly following the voting day, although maybe at some point they do actually publish the poll-by-poll results. The point here is that, it's quite clear from the statement on Elections Canada website that the publication or the public availability of poll-by-poll results would not happen within 24 hours of the voting day. And here you have, the Canadian government already, within 12 hours of the announcement of President Maduro's victory, insisting that the polling results be published. I don't know what the Venezuelan government's intentions are in that regard. I hope they do it, because this is also a request that is being made by other governments, including the government of Brazil. As I read their public statements, they too would like to see the poll-by-poll results. And if they don't produce it, the Venezuelan government, of course, people will want to know why, and I hope that there is a credible explanation, but we'll just have to see. In any case, at the same time as all of this is going on, the National Lawyers Guild, which sent 5 election observers here, confirmed today by public statement that the elections were free, fair, and transparent. There are, of course, hundreds of election observers around the world, including myself, who concur in that conclusion. So this is a work in progress. I had a conversation today with a sort of similarly minded pair of academics who are in England nowadays. We talked about what the West is likely to do in light of this result. My own view, which I shared with them, is that the West has a lot on its plate nowadays. It has the disastrous war in Ukraine, the Western-backed, funded, armed genocide in occupied Palestine. It has the Israeli military being humiliated in northern occupied Palestine by the Islamic resistance in Lebanon. It has some quite significant economic problems brewing with the accelerating movement towards de-dollarization, towards the rejection of the United States dollar as the global reserve currency. And of course, there is this psychodrama in the United States. And let me just say a word or two about that. It's quite ironic for a whole host of reasons, but particularly in light of what's going on in the Democratic Party, for a Democratic president and vice president to be lecturing Venezuela about democracy. And the immediate reason, I literally could spend hours explaining why this is utterly outrageous. But in light of the political record of the United States government, the foreign policy record, but I want to just focus on what's been happening in the last few months in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party basically protected Joe Biden in the nomination process. Senior officials of the Democratic Party made it very clear last year that there was not going to be any contested nomination. They weren't going to hold debates, and they weren't going to enable others to enter the race to challenge Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination. And by the time you get to, the late last year, or actually this goes all the way back to 2019, it was quite clear, as I've said many times to anybody who was looking objectively at the evidence, that Joe Biden was cognitively diminished and that his condition was getting worse by the day. And the idea, by the time we get to late 2023, that Joe Biden was going to be fit to be the President of the United States for another 4 years following the conclusion of his term was alarming, to say the least. But nonetheless, the Democratic Party squashed any prospect of a contested nomination. And then, when they were embarrassed by his pathetically bad performance in his debate with Donald Trump, they immediately turned on Joe Biden and orchestrated his replacement with Kamala Harris. She has essentially been anointed by unknown persons within the Democratic Party that they probably do include, they certainly do include Barack Obama, because he's openly endorsed Kamala Harris, and Hillary Clinton, who's openly endorsed Kamala Harris. They're definitely involved. But there are a bunch of donors involved as well. We know this because of statements that were made by certain donors and Democratic Party insiders to the press. We just don't know exactly who these donors are. So at the end of the day, it is they who have chosen Kamala Harris as Joe Biden's replacement. Of course, as a technical matter, I suppose someone who has a legitimate prospect of winning the nomination, wresting it from Kamala Harris, the anointed one, might still enter the race, but given the commentary we're seeing from the Democratic Party elite, and that we're just, I don't know, 3 weeks away from the Democratic Party convention, and nobody with any kind of standing in the Democratic Party has said that they are going to contest the nomination. I mean, they've basically rolled out the red carpet for Kamala Harris. This is profoundly anti-democratic. It's absurd. And, Kamala Harris is now almost acting as if she is the president. Now, if Joe Biden resigned, then Kamala Harris could assume his responsibilities in a constitutional manner, but he hasn't done that. Technically, he's still the president, and he's almost disappeared from public view, and she's been elevated to the throne for all intents and purposes. The media is now focusing on what she has to say is happening in Venezuela. The media is now focusing about what she has to say about the genocide in Gaza, what she has to say about the issue of reproductive rights. That's all the focus. Joe Biden has essentially been vaporized from the public discourse. So this is, in many ways, a soft coup. One thing is for sure, whether you feel it qualifies as a coup or not, this is as anti-democratic as you can possibly imagine, both how they put Joe Biden into a position to run again in 2024, how they removed him from that position, and how they anointed Kamala to be the nominee. And the other thing, interesting observation I have about this whole thing is that despite the fact that Kamala is being treated now like a rock star, I haven't seen her give any sort of major speeches. And I think that the people who are trying to elevate her to the position, who are determined to make her the next president of the United States, dread the idea that she'll be allowed to speak, particularly in any unscripted manner, because every time she opens her mouth, she sounds like she's smoking some bad dope. So it'll be quite interesting to see what the polls show once the American public has had an opportunity to refresh its recollection about the incoherence of Kamala Harris. And unlike Joe Biden, she doesn't have the excuse of cognitive decline brought on probably by advanced age. She's just an empty suit. Why wouldn't they at least offer somebody like Marianne Harris an opportunity to contest the nomination, or Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan? I'm not a fan of Gretchen Whitmer. I don't know that much about Marianne Harris, but she certainly is a better option than Kamala Harris. But one thing's for sure, both Gretchen Whitmer and Marianne Harris are much more capable intellectually, oratorically, and I think emotionally, to assume the burdens of the United States presidency than Kamala Harris. But hey, what do I know? Anyways, I'm going to continue my journey. I'm pretty much alone out here. I'm going to see if I can find some more action in the streets of Caracas. So I had to pause my discussion about the anointed one, Kamala, because while I was speaking about her, I received 2 calls from a gentleman by the name of Gabriel. He's one of the government attachés who have been assigned to ensure that the members of my International Observer delegation, their needs are being met. And I called him after pausing my discussion about Kamala, asked why he was trying to reach me, and he said he wanted to know my precise location because there was, as he put it, turmoil in the city, and he had concerns for my safety. So I let him know that I was in this area, which is I would say 2 or 3 kilometers from my hotel, and he politely asked me to return because he was concerned. Which brings me to something I omitted to mention. When I was in the lobby of my hotel and about to depart for this walkabout, a comrade of mine from Colombia said that friends of his who had come, were part of the delegation, and tried to return to Colombia today, were not able to do so because opposition protesters had blocked the highway to the airport. So there's some concern about whether I will be able to depart tomorrow as planned. It could be a bit of a wild ride, but we'll have to see. In any event, I hope that, for the sake of the people of Venezuela, that there isn't violence. So far, I'm not aware of any violence, but given the history of political violence in this country and the rather ruthless attempts, many attempts of the United States government, supported by its Western client states, to overthrow first Hugo Chavez and then Nicolas Maduro by means of violence, economic warfare, disinformation campaigns, and so forth. It wouldn't surprise me at all if there was violence, frankly. But let us hope that, as the president himself stressed, the transition is peaceful, whatever the outcome of all of this may be. So this brings me to the whole subject of regime change. You know, I think we should all be able to agree by now on two things. First of all, punishing a country, destroying its economy, subjecting its people to collective economic punishment. And there is a study, a very reputable study, from the Center of Policy Alternatives, I think it was published in 2019, which showed from over the prior 1 to 2 years, economic sanctions had likely killed 40,000 Venezuelans. So that was back in 2019. We can imagine how much greater the death toll is now. But in any event, it's clear that this type of economic warfare is not successful in, certainly not successful in developing democracy, human rights, and in causing governments that are disfavored by the West to be removed from power. This has failed in Iran, it's failed in Cuba, it's failed in Russia, it certainly has failed in Venezuela. It failed in Iraq, by the way, as well. Ultimately, it wasn't the economic sanctions which killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children, the US economic sanctions that removed Saddam Hussein from power. It was a criminal war of aggression and the murder of Saddam Hussein. And I'm not going to defend the man. I do think he was a brutal dictator. Certainly people who live in the country and who are opposed to US hegemony have confirmed that to me. But nonetheless, he was murdered. And it wasn't for the purposes of protecting the human rights of the Iraqis, I assure you. So why? Why does the West persist in trying to achieve regime change through economic sanctions? Are these people just congenitally sadistic? I mean, is it just in their nature? Do they enjoy the suffering of others? Who knows? But while I'm on the subject of the suffering of others resulting from US regime change efforts and economic warfare, and this is really, I'm not going to pull any punches on this. I mean, I'm not known to, and I'm certainly not going to start now. If you believe that all of these attempted regime change initiatives, or any of them, being attempted by means of criminal sanctions, which, by the way, flagrantly violate the United Nations Charter because they haven't been approved by the UN Security Council, if you believe that any of this is actually done for the well-being of the peoples whose countries are targeted with these sanctions, you are completely and utterly delusional. You're delusional. I mean, there's a mountain of evidence to the contrary now. We should at least be able to agree that Western governments do not interfere in the internal politics of other states out of the goodness of their hearts. No, they want to say it again and again and again, it can't be said enough, to install vassals who will be subservient to the US-based oligarchy, and ultimately enable them, these oligarchs, to rape and pillage their countries with reckless abandon. That's what it's all about. Any sane person who pays any attention to the historical record is left with no alternative but to come to that conclusion. Now, if you are a person who's just struggling to get by, or you have some kind of, debilitating illness, you can't pay your medical bills, you've got 2 jobs, and the rest of your time is spent taking care of your kids who hardly ever see you. I understand that you are not in a position to inform yourself, even though the information is out there and readily available. All you have to do is look. But I can forgive that you'd be mistaken. You would suffer from the grievous illusion that Western governments aggressively interfere in the politics of other states in order to achieve democracy, human rights, and protect human rights, and enhance the well-being of the peoples who live there. But if you are somebody who works in the media and you are commenting upon, writing about, reporting about foreign affairs in any country, and you are spreading this bullshit, you have no excuse. You're a disgrace. You're an absolute disgrace. You are either a paid liar or you are inexcusably delusional. Not excusably delusional, inexcusably delusional. People like this, Mr. Visitor's Digest, who sent me that ridiculous video that doesn't prove a goddamn thing about what happened yesterday. And I pointed out to him, by the way, I'm actually in Venezuela. And guess what? I haven't seen anything like that. Where are you, sipping a beer by your pool on Vancouver Island? Anyways, this also brings me to an exchange I had with a friend of mine. It's a very important point I have to raise. It's one of the bees I got in my bonnet. It's like a beehive up there in my bonnet. A friend of mine, I have great respect for him. A man who cares deeply about the Palestinian cause, committed to justice, not just for Palestinians, for all peoples. Sends me a message yesterday. He's currently based in Europe, although he's Canadian. And in it he laments. He knows where I am. He's been following my commentary on Venezuela. He laments that Al Jazeera has issued a report in which it's castigating the Maduro government for irregularities in the electoral process and for being repressive and blah, blah, blah. And he says to me, this is the same Al Jazeera that covers, the plight of the Palestinian people heroically. And I just about blew my gasket. Okay, yes, I will readily accept that the coverage of Al Jazeera when it comes to Israel's sadistic, diabolical, satanic brutalization of the Palestinian people is second to none of any English language major media organization. It's not the best in the media. There are independent journalists, by the way, who are doing far better coverage than Al Jazeera, like Ali Abunimah of Electronic Intifada. I mean, I can't think of anybody who's doing better media coverage than Ali and his colleagues at Electronic Intifada. But in any event, by the standards of major media organizations in the English-speaking world, Al Jazeera is the best. I'll grant you that, but that doesn't mean that they can be trusted to provide accurate reporting on all foreign policy matters, on all conflict zones. I mean, that's just preposterous. So let me make a simple point, and I hope my friend, whom I love and respect deeply, is listening to this to drive home how insane this is, this idea that because a media organization does good reporting on one subject, you can trust it on all subjects. Al Jazeera is basically owned and operated, controlled by the Qatari royal family. Now, I've watched over the years hundreds of hours of coverage on Al Jazeera. I've gone to its website many times. It's not just about Palestine. I follow its coverage in other areas of West Asia. I've also read a number of its articles having to do with the Ukraine war, to give you some examples. And I have never, ever, not once, seen a peep of criticism of the Qatari autocracy. Not once. Now, are you going to tell me that the Qatari autocracy is democratic? That these people respect human rights? Are you kidding me, man? And yet, Al Jazeera has never uttered a peep. I challenge you to find an article, to find a video report in which Al Jazeera takes to task the Qatari autocracy for its anti-democratic behavior. Hell will freeze over before you provide such thing. So, what does that tell you about Al Jazeera? What that tells you about Al Jazeera is on some matters it can be trusted, and others it cannot be trusted at all. And guess what? One of them is Venezuela. Another one is the Ukraine war. Al Jazeera's reporting on the Ukraine war is a complete and utter disgrace. They basically are a mouthpiece for the British and American governments, like every other major media organization in the West. So please, people, progressive people, people of justice, anti-imperialists out there, please disabuse yourself of this idiotic notion. I say this with love and respect. I'm sorry to use harsh language, but disabuse yourselves of this preposterous notion that because a media organization does some good reporting on one subject, you can trust it for all subjects. This is nonsense. Okay, Al Jazeera, like every other major media organization in the English-speaking language, is doing abominable reporting on Venezuela. And this has been true for decades. Okay, use your minds, think critically, please. The well-being of our brothers and sisters in Venezuela and elsewhere depend upon it. Glad to have gotten that off my chest. What else do I have to share with you today as I work my way back to the hotel? Oh yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about the imperfections of the government of Nicolas Maduro. Now, I've heard credible arguments made that there is significant amount of corruption in Venezuela. Venezuela, of course, would not be unique in that regard. The corruption in Western countries is of an epic scale. But that doesn't excuse corruption in Venezuela, and I readily acknowledge that. So I can accept, although I'm not in a position to say to what degree the problem exists, I readily accept that there is a problem with corruption here. I personally have seen no evidence that the president or his inner circle are profiting from corruption, but I can't vouch for them either. All I can say is I've got good reason to believe, based on all the material I've read about this country, that there is a significant problem with corruption. And there are questions around economic mismanagement. If you look over the course of the Maduro tenure, certainly there are serious questions about economic management, but you have to take into proper account these crushing, sadistic sanctions that have been inflicted upon Venezuela. And secondly, there was a sharp drop in the price of oil, which was bound to badly hurt. I'm talking about post-2015. This was bound to do serious damage to the economy of a country that has the largest oil reserves in the world in a global economy that is fundamentally dependent upon fossil fuels. So we have to take that into account as well. But there probably have been mistakes made from an economic perspective. At the same time, as I mentioned in a prior report, in 2023, GDP growth, and for what it's worth, GDP as a measure of wealth, in Venezuela was 8%, far above that of any other Western country, I believe. And last year was 4%, robust by the standards of any Western country. And this year it's projected to be 4.5%, barring some explosion of political violence nourished by the psychopaths in Washington. So we have to take that into account as well. But you know what? I don't claim, and I wouldn't even think of claiming, that the government of Nicolas Maduro is perfect. I'm sure it could improve its performance in many respects. I certainly don't believe that he is a dictator. I think that's complete nonsense. I do think that the government is trying honestly to improve the lives of the citizens of this country, and I do think it is absolutely committed to the sovereignty of Venezuela and refuses to become a vassal of the US or any other country. Now, the point I want to make here is, you know, if you want Venezuelans to have a better government, then why don't you offer them a better option? Are you going to tell me that these lunatics surrounding Maria Corina Machado are a better option? Maria Corina Machado actually urged the United States government to invade her country to remove Nicolas Maduro from power and to snuff out the Bolivarian Revolution. She urged the US to inflict sanctions upon her country. She was closely tied to that corrupt buffoon Juan Guaido, who usurped the Venezuelan constitution, for God's sakes. You know, one could argue she should be in jail. But she isn't in jail. She's free. She's running around shooting her mouth off and saying that Nicolas Maduro is a dictator, when anybody can see with their own eyes that that's not true, whatever his flaws may be. So the problem here, wow, that was a close call. The problem here is that if you're genuinely interested in better governance in Venezuela for the benefit of the Venezuelan people, what you would do is you would support a better option, not some far-right neoliberal lunatics who are going to sell the country out to Washington, or you would constructively engage with the elected government and help it to improve its performance, its management economically, to deal with the problem of corruption. That's what you would do. You wouldn't back this little puppet of the George W. Bush administration, Maria Corina Machado. And you know, another thing I want to say about this character, Machado, is that you know, a lot of people say, well, she was disqualified. She was disqualified by the Venezuelan Supreme Court, which is controlled by Nicolas Maduro, from running in this election. Look, first of all, that's not quite what happened. What happened back in 2023, before this election was called, she and a number of other candidates were rendered ineligible by the courts of Venezuela to run for public office for a period of time. And in January of this year, after having been petitioned to lift the temporary ban on her participation in politics, the Venezuelan Supreme Court declined to do that, and it left a pre-existing ban in place. It didn't impose a ban after the election was called. it was asked to lift the ban, and it declined to do that. Now, it did it on the basis of her, her dealings with corrupt anti-constitutional initiatives by Guaido in particular. And I'm going to be honest with you, even though I'm a lawyer, I'm not in any position to tell you whether or not the decision of the Venezuelan Supreme Court was based upon a proper reading of Venezuelan law. I would have to be, not necessarily qualified to practice law in this country, but I would have to spend a lot of time apprising myself of the eligibility requirements for running for public office, and I would have to consult with people who are qualified to practice law in this country. And all these people out there who are running around saying, oh man, the Venezuelan Supreme Court disqualified her as proof of an illegitimate election. Well, these people have no idea. Just like me, I can't say with any confidence that the decision was right or wrong. All I know is it was a decision taken by the Venezuelan Supreme Court. And when we're told that it's controlled by the government of Nicolas Maduro, well, what is the proof of that? I've never seen any proof that Nicolas Maduro controls the government or the top court of Venezuela any more than the US government controls the top court of the United States or the Canadian government controls the top court of Canada. I mean, remember, it's those politicians who choose the judges who sit on these benches. And you can be damn sure that the politicians in Canada and the United States, and I'm sure in other countries, systematically appoint to these benches people who are ideologically aligned with them. There are no left-wing radicals on the Supreme Court of Canada and the United States because no left-wing radical has ever run the damn country. So, controlling the Supreme Court of Venezuela? Show me the goods, man. Where's the proof? All I know is it was a decision taken by the Supreme Court, and it's not up to us as foreigners who do not have a sufficient grasp of the Venezuelan legal system to question the legitimacy of its decision. This is an internal matter for the people of Venezuela. She was disqualified, live with it, move on, don't consort with people like Juan Guaido. Don't ask the US government to invade your country to impose crushing sanctions on it if you want to run for political office in Venezuela. That's just some friendly advice, Maria. Anyways, I'm now approaching my hotel. I'm sweating profusely. It's quite a humid day out here. It's not too hot, but it's quite humid. About to walk by a number of police officers. After I've gotten beyond them, I'll probably be signing off unless I see something else of interest. And by the way, I also heard, there's not just opposition unrest in the city. There has also been quite a bit of celebration. I've seen reports that in working class neighborhoods of the city of Caracas, there's been a lot of pot banging, a form of celebration here by supporters of Chavismo. So I've neared the end of my journey. I'm steps away from my hotel, returned safely, although I came within inches of being run over by a motorcycle lunatic. Otherwise, an uneventful rant. I hope you enjoyed this rather lengthy rant, and perhaps even found it a tad cathartic. I certainly did. I did have one thought as I was walking this way, and by the way, I just received a message from a journalist friend of mine who lives in Caracas, has lived here for many years, that some major, well, no deaths or injuries as far as I know, but there's a lot of burning going on apparently in an area of Caracas known as Altamira, which is fairly affluent. I understand it to be an opposition stronghold. That happened after the rain stopped this afternoon, she tells me. But as I say, I've not seen any violence or unrest. I've been outside walking around now, probably done about 6 or 7 kilometers. It's been a good hour and a half I've been out here alone. It occurred to me, just as I was about to close this out, that I tend to give my most impassioned rants when I'm in the global south. Places like Beirut, Caracas, Palestine, Baghdad. And why is that? Well, I think the reason for that is when you are in these places, you really begin to get a sense, to a degree that you cannot when you're in the West, of the suffering that Western governments have imposed upon the wonderful peoples living in the non-Western world, the diverse, wonderful, sophisticated, culturally rich, ancient peoples and civilizations of the non-Western world. And that tends to get me quite worked up. I apologize if you found my rant today rather vehement, but seeing what I see all around me, a country with such immense potential being tortured for now more than 2 decades, actually going back much further than that, simply because it happens to be in a position that's geostrategically important to the United States and is sitting on a vast ocean of oil. That just gets me real worked up. In any event, I hope that you will like this video, share this video, and if you don't subscribe to my channel, please do so. I really only began to build a following on YouTube, or tried to, do that in an organized, systematic sort of way in the last 12 months. And this work, the work that I do as a journalist, in order for it to be impactful, I need to reach as many people as possible. For now, this is Dimitri Lascaris signing off from Caracas, Venezuela on July 29, 2024.